This is a video response to ToolTime9901, who made a video describing what he calls bonnet fiction. Basically, it's these romance novels that talk about characters who take place in Amish times, characters who take place a long time ago, and he's describing how he thinks it's just odd that this is the way that the culture moves, and this is what these individuals are interested in. He said it's because it's largely promulgated and enjoyed by evangelical Christian types who basically the point he's making is they can't fit into this time and they can't exist with the mentalities that they have, since many of them have a patriarchal mentality. Like, they believe that the woman should be the stay-at-home mom, and they believe that the woman should be submissive to the man and do what he says and let him do the job, and all of these things. And that's true. I certainly think it's true, because many of them do have outdated perspectives of reality, and it can only exist in the past. But I think we have to ask why they hold an older mentality in the first place. In my mind, there's two types of people. And don't get me wrong, that's a huge generalization. It's probably the biggest generalization you can ever do, is cut into very clear groups. But I'm going to do it anyway, because why not? There's two types of people. People who are willing to move forward, and people who like to sit in the past. Now, you have to move forward to get progress, but the past offers something else also. It offers a sense of security. Because whatever you've experienced in the past, you're obviously it's safe because you survived through it. You went through it and you got through and you're okay. From that, I think that nostalgia, I think that's the feeling that you get from something in the past, and it offers you security. So there's a certain feeling to that people can enjoy and appreciate. Whether it's in your life personally or your cultural life. As an American, this is something of America. You know, there are various instances of this. If you talk about your personal life, one I can think of is a few years ago, there was a member of my family who was older, and he died. Now, he was known for being a workaholic, like he liked to work a lot, and then once he retired, he was into, I don't even know what he did, but he didn't have a lot of time for family and friends, and a lot of people were very angry at him about that. Yet when he died, and everybody was at the funeral parlor, they were putting it in the most positive light that they could. Like, they described him as being very hardworking and determined and driven, and he had the best interests of everybody in mind. Even though when you actually talked to them, he had a very rough exterior, and it didn't seem like he was too interested in socializing with people. But I think when these people were looking back at him, they genuinely had positive thoughts and feelings about him. They genuinely felt like he was a good person and they had something to miss. I'm not saying that he wasn't worth missing, I'm just saying I think they idealized who he was. Another example of it being in your personal life is the other day I discovered a YouTube channel that had all the songs from the original Pokemon CD. Now, I don't know how old you are, or if Pokemon was the thing when you were a kid, but for me, it was everything. It was basically my life at the time. And listening to that CD, it brought back so many nostalgic memories. It was really incredible. You know, like, oh yeah, my childhood, I remember that. Funny thing is, I don't want to say I had a bad childhood, I really didn't. First off, I was kind of socially isolated, and I was very weird. And I also, I didn't really know who I was. I was very confused and kind of depressed during that time. So, it wasn't exactly good. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't really good. Yet, when I think back to that time and I have nostalgia, I get a positive feeling from it. And I find that to be very odd. It's just because in the past, things are comforting, and we idealize things that are in the past. And that's the way things work in the culture, too. It's like how many standard Republicans of today will glorify the 50s, 1950s. They're the greatest era ever. Because you look back and everybody's all smiley and happy and prim and proper. Of course, the reality is it was very oppressive back then. Like, there wasn't a lot of room for personal liberty. And then a bunch of people will say, well, maybe the 60s were better because that was cultural revolution. Of course, the problem with that is it wasn't really about rebellion. It was having a specific type of rebellion. It was following the social group mentality. Like, this is what's popular now, and you're supposed to uphold that instead. In reality, anytime something happens in life, there are good qualities and bad qualities. But the farther away the farther away it happened, the easier it is to remember the good qualities, and the harder it is to remember the bad ones. I think that's why people are glorifying the Amish in this way, because it's such a simple time. Even though there are a lot of bad things about it, it was very oppressive. They didn't have a lot of the things that we had. They didn't have the medicine, so people would die of diseases. They didn't have the science, so their life was much more difficult. They didn't have the interdependence. A lot of them were very isolated. It was very, very patriarchal. A lot of people were very racist. There wasn't a huge notion of free speech back then. There are a lot of negative things. but people view it as being simple and just a relaxing time, and they can hook on to that positive feeling. When it's older, it's harder to remember the bad things, especially if it didn't happen in your life. And I feel like that's why these individuals are really interested in it, because it's from such a long time ago, they can idealize it and say that it's so great without having to mention or realize the negative things that came with it. That's just how our human minds work. The longer it is, it's harder to remember anything bad, but we hook on to those positive emotions because that's all we have in life. We have to have something positive to hook onto, and if we got through it, we survived, it must have been something positive, and that must have what guided us through, right?